Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 39. So if you want to open your Bibles and turn there with me, that would be great. While you're getting there, though, this message is kind of, as its title, it says, when Jesus sends you home. And this has been kind of a homecoming weekend for me in a way. We all know when we're in high school or in college, they have these special homecoming weekends. There's a dance, a special football game. People who have graduated from this particular high school or college come home and see how things have changed or see how things have stayed the same. And yesterday, I had a fun time with my 3 kids over at my parents' house, actually, at their house, camping in their backyard. Just one thing I like to do every year, not necessarily at my parents' house, but air out the tent, make sure that there's no moths. I don't put mothballs in with my tent because I don't want to be spelling mothballs while I'm camping. But I like to take it out, air it out, make sure it's all set up. And the kids had a wonderful time. My parents had a wonderful time. We had fire and s'mores, and the kids wanted nothing to do with gooey marshmallows, but they wanted the regular ones before they were toasted. They're 4 and 2, so that's maybe why they don't quite get that cooked marshmallows are like the creme de la creme of camping. You can't get any better than cooked marshmallows in front of a campfire. And as I was preparing this message, I kept thinking about kind of what does it mean to go home? What does it mean to come back? And here I am with you, my home church, the church I was almost born into, sharing a message about what happens if Jesus sends us home. Because there are a lot of people, as we read through Scripture, we read through the New Testament, that wanted to walk with Jesus, but certain things came up and they put other priorities ahead of Jesus, and Jesus said, that's not good enough. I need all of you. And yet, the story that we're going to be reading this morning is about a person who was willing to give it all up and willing to follow Christ, and Jesus says, I need you to go back home. So, let's read together starting in verse 26. Then, this is Jesus and his disciples, they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Jesus then asked him, What is your name? And he said, Legion. For many demons had entered him, and they begged him not to commit, and he begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding city of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got in the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you. And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. All right, if you're familiar with how I like to teach, you're going to know we're going to do some historical, cultural background, because I think that's important. We need to understand partly what Jesus' culture is like, who the people he's talking to are like, and what they are thinking, because then that way we can kind of better understand for ourselves today what God may be saying to us. So, in verse 26, we see that Jesus and his disciples were in a boat, and they're heading to a place called the Gerasenes, which is across the Sea of Galilee. It's on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. which is opposite of Israel. Israel's on the west side of the sea. The Gerasenes is on the east side of the sea. So they have to cross the whole sea to get to this area. And it's full of Gentiles, people who are non-Jewish, people who don't know necessarily the first thing about Judaism, about Yahweh, about the Lord. They may have heard some things because they may have been doing some trading around the sea and have had some interaction with some fishermen from Israel, but that's the extent, really, of what they know about Judaism, about the Jewish nation, or about any of that. Even the word Gerasenes is peculiar. It means those who come from a pilgrimage or a fight. So these people probably have traveled quite a distance, maybe trying to get to a holy land, maybe trying to get to a place where they can worship their gods in a more safe area, or possibly they're leaving from a fight. They might be refugees, or both. So they've decided to settle here on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Now that's important too, because in ancient culture, without bodies of water, without rivers, you go thirsty, you go hungry. People settle where there's food, where there's water, where it's easier to get your food and your water. Digging a well is not an easy thing. I mean, they didn't have diesel-powered augers where you could drill hundreds of feet into the earth to get your water. You have to go to where the water is. So this is a natural place where people would settle. It's just on the opposite side of the Sea of Galilee. And we have to remember, too, that Jesus grew up around the Sea of Galilee. So he's familiar with the geography. The disciples were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. They know all about the Sea of Galilee. They know what's on the other side. Maybe they may have never been there, but at least they know that there's this Gentile population on the other side of the sea. So they're over there, and Jesus steps out of the boat, and the first person to greet Jesus is a demon-possessed man in verse 27. A demon-possessed Gentile man. He's not Jewish. He has no, like I said, understanding of how Jews think or even their religious practices or how they interact with people who are non-Jewish. There's this big schism, this big separation between Jew and non-Jew. People who are not Jewish are thought of as unclean, unworthy, not holy. Israel is the chosen nation, not these Gentiles. God loves us. So the first person that comes is someone who already has 2 strikes against him. He's cursed because he's got demons living in him or oppressing him, and he's Gentile. See, Leviticus 21 tells us that anyone who touches a dead body is unclean. And where is this man living? He's living among the tombs. He's living in a place of uncleanliness, a cursed place. If you are to live in the tombs, you are considered cursed, because that is your last refuge. Not even the living will have you live near them. This man has it in a very, very bad way. It also states that he has been unclothed, aka naked. He's been running around naked for a long time, it says. So he's cursed, he's shamed, and he's unclean. This man's a lost cause. I'm betting if the disciples would have seen this man, they would have made a wide berth to go around him. Because number one, they don't want to become unclean. And number two, he's full of shame and he's unclean. You don't go near these people. The other interesting thing that I found while studying is that there's this belief in the ancient culture that a lot of gods, a lot of evil gods or demons reside in the waters, in the depths, in the sea. They also call this the abyss. So fishermen were sometimes thought of as some of the most brave people in their culture because they're willing to brave the depths. They're willing to brave this abyss to catch fish, to make a living. And specifically with the Sea of Galilee, because of its geographic location, there's mountains around it, and this creates all kinds of troubles for the sea at night, because the cold air will come down from the mountains and sweep in and create all these cold fronts. And you can talk to Craig James about all that stuff. He will be able to tell you because he's a weatherman. I'm not. But what happens is it churns up the sea, and people don't understand why this happens. Almost every night it churns up the sea. It creates these storms, and it becomes choppy. And people stay off the sea at night, and this is partly why the sea is called the abyss, and why people thought demons resided in the sea, is because it was uncontrollable, it was unmanageable, it was frightening at night. Well, if we just look a few verses back in this very chapter, starting in verse 22, Jesus and the disciples decide to cross the Sea of Galilee in a boat overnight. You're not supposed to do that, right? Because the demons will get you. The evil spirits, the evil gods are rise up in this at night during the sea, or at night in the sea. So they're crossing the sea, and if you read the story, it says a storm happens. A storm comes up, and the disciples are watching Jesus sleep, and they're thinking, is he not going to wake up? What's going to happen? We're going to be drowned. Doesn't he realize that we're in peril? And Jesus has to be woken up. He just doesn't, he's sleeping. And he has to be woken up, and he calms the storm. He calms the storm. And the disciples are amazed, and they're like, wow, even the winds and the waves obey this man. And the next morning, they happen upon this demon-possessed man. See, Jesus has already, in verses 22 through 25, shown his authority over these evil spirits to his disciples by calming the seas, by calming the waves, by calming the winds. They're all, one third of the disciples are fishermen. They know the stories. They know what's in the abyss. They know what's in the deep parts of the sea, or at least they think they do. The legends are all churning around in their mind, and they see Jesus calm this storm and say, no, I have authority over this. You don't need to worry. Oh, you of little faith, why are you worrying? Now, the other thing I find interesting is that really the only place we read in the Bible of demon possession and demon exorcism is in the New Testament. And I wondered why. Why is that? Why is there no real mention of demons in the Old Testament, or demon possession in the Old Testament? And I did some research, and I looked back, and there's really only one place that mentions anything kind of similar to demon oppression, and that's in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 14 through 23. And it says, briefly, I'll just surmise it here, that Saul, the king of Israel, the first king of Israel, had the presence of God, the Spirit of God, leave him because he was rebelling against God, and he was making some very bad choices. And when that happened, it said, an evil spirit of the Lord, which I don't know what that means. I just let it be what it is, because I don't understand that yet. Someday I may not. But that's a rabbit trail. We're going to leave that for another day. So an evil spirit of the Lord comes in and is dwelling with Saul. And he gets these migraines, and he becomes angry and furious. And the chief priests and the scribes tell Saul, well, maybe you need someone to sing you some music to calm this evil spirit. So he calls David in to sing on the harp and the lyre. And whenever David sings, the evil spirit of the Lord seems to leave Saul, and he seems calmed. And this is how David actually enters the court of Saul as a boy. He's singing songs. The psalms that we have here in our very word are some of the songs that may have been sung to Saul while he was in the middle of a demon oppression or possession. That's the closest we have. Now, David never actually delivers Saul from these demons. He just kind of calms Saul's attitude and Saul's anger and his angst. But also, this isn't the first time in Luke where we read that Jesus heals someone who is oppressed with a demon. The first time that happens in Luke is in Luke 4:33. Now, this man is a Jew. He's in a synagogue, and he's demon-possessed, and he heals him. And then in Luke chapter 8, verse 2, we read that Mary Magdalene had 7 demons exorcised from her. That's it. It says Mary Magdalene joined their group. She was demon-possessed, and 7 demons were exorcised from her. That's basically all it says about Mary Magdalene. That's it. So Already Jesus has healed a Jewish man. He has healed a Jewish woman. He has calmed the demons of the sea. And he meets this man with demons that's caused him to be naked and thrashing about and breaking chains and fetters and all these things. So do we see kind of what Luke is trying to do here as he builds his story, as he's telling this narrative? This is a story. This is a narrative. Luke is using certain literary elements here to help us see things, to help us, the reader, see what Jesus is doing. He's guiding us. That's what a good storyteller does, right? He takes us from point A to point B, and all along there, he's foreshadowing what's happening. And Luke is doing the very same thing here. I mean, we really need to be careful that we just don't pluck certain things from certain passages and say, wow, this is great, and this is amazing, and this applies to this, and it applies to that. Yes, maybe that happens, but there's a larger scope here. There's something bigger happening. And this is kind of why I want us to all just kind of slowly walk through these things, because I'm trying to lead us to the very same conclusion that Luke is leading us to. See, now in verse 28, the demon sees the authority of Jesus because he falls down. It says he falls down before Jesus. So normally when you fall down before somebody, you're kneeling face down with your hands in the dirt and your face in the dirt to show homage, to show usually to a king or some kind of royal official, someone who has authority over you, to say, you are worthy of me surrendering to you, of serving you. This demon here is no different. He's doing the same thing. He recognizes that Jesus has power. And a few verses back, the disciples, the ones who are supposed to be following Jesus closely, and who are, they don't see that. They don't see the same power that this demon sees. They're amazed. They're like, wow, this is amazing. But do they fall down and give him homage the way this demon does? No. See, the other thing that we can kind of infer from the passage that this man is Gentile is because he says, what do you want with me, Son of the Most High God? Most High God, meaning there are other gods, meaning that there is not just one true God over Israel, but you are the highest above all gods. So this man, again, he's Gentile. He doesn't say, blessed, or what do you want with me, Son of Yahweh, or Son of Elohim, or Son of God. He says the Most High God. So these are some of these small contextual things that are happening. And the other thing I find interesting is in verse 29 we read that the demon doesn't want Jesus to torment him. Okay, well, what has he been doing to this man his whole entire life? Nothing but torment. He goes, oh, I can dish it out, but no, don't give it to me. I can't take it. So please don't torment me. Please don't torment me. Even though that's what I'm all about. That's all I care about, is tormenting this poor person. I mean, he's brought this man to a place of utter nakedness, cursing, being watched, being guarded, being left alone, where the only people to comfort him are gravestones and markers of people who used to be alive. And the thing of it is, Jesus' command over the demon he seems to honor the demon in a weird way. I would think if I were Jesus, I'd say, yeah, right, I know what you're about. I know what you're going to do. I've known from the beginning of creation what demons do, what the enemy does. He just comes to seek and destroy. But yet Jesus honors this demon's wish. He even acts with mercy and pity towards his utmost enemy. What kind of love is that? I mean, I had to pause when I came and realized to that realization that even Jesus is compassionate towards demons. Now, maybe he was doing it because he knew that if he were to torment these demons before they left, they might torment this man further. I don't know. That's the only thing I can infer as to why Jesus would grant this demon's wish. These demons' wish, they're plural, there's a lot of them. For it says, I am legion, I am many. See, the other interesting thing is, yet we have yet to hear from the man himself. It's these demons that are speaking for him. The man doesn't come up to Jesus and say, I need help, please help. I have these demons that are constantly tormenting me, throwing me all over the place, taking me out into the desert. He doesn't even have a friend with him that says, please deliver this man. No one in the Gerasenes has heard of Jesus yet. They don't know. They're a whole sea away. There's no internet, there's no CNN, there's no newspapers. Word of Jesus, in our minds, would travel very, very, very slowly. I mean, it would take maybe a couple weeks for it to get from Jerusalem to the next biggest city in Israel, that Jesus was doing these wonderful and miraculous things. And to get it to cross a sea where people are afraid of the demons that might attack you when you cross it. See, no one has heard of Jesus yet. He's gone to a place where no one has heard of him. The other thing that we find in verse 29 is that this man is in shackles, meaning that he is a danger to not only himself but to others. They're binding him for his own good and for the sake of their community. They don't want this man tormenting other people. And they really don't want him tormenting himself, but there's nothing else that they can do. The best thing that they can do is tie him in shackles and hope that holds him. But it doesn't. He's able to break them with the power of the demons. Now, the other thing we need to realize when we are talking about ancient cultures is that names have a specific purpose. They have a lot of weight. They carry a lot of meaning with them. So when Jesus asks this demon's name, he says, what is your name? He's trying to find out who this demon is. Because so far, all he's really gotten from this demon is fluff and stuff that Jesus already knows. So he needs to know who this demon is to properly take care of it. So the demons say, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now, the Roman term for legion means 100. Like you'd have 100 people to command, which would be a legion of soldiers. So there's a lot. Close to 100, it doesn't say specifically, but the idea is there are a lot of demons in this man. So far, the greatest amount of demons that Jesus has exorcised is 7 from Mary Magdalene, which is a lot. It seems like a lot. This is exponentially greater. Now, in verse 31, the demon says, please do not torment me. Do not send us into the abyss. Okay, the abyss. We've got to remember that the sea could be a parallel to the abyss. People have this rolling around in their mind. In fact, the demon wants he wants nothing to do with the abyss so badly that he drives the man into the desert, the complete opposite direction of the sea. Demons want nothing to do with the abyss, for they know that's where they're supposed to spend all of eternity. Now, there's a bigger abyss, and if we read that in Revelation, we'll understand fully what the abyss is. But right now, we've got to be thinking like these first century Jews and first century Gentiles, where all they know is that the abyss is part of the sea. It's a darkness. It's separation from God. So they ask Jesus to be sent into the pigs, which are mucking about close by. The other interesting thing here is that the pigs are already unclean animals. So the demons have an inside track on Judaism. They understand that God has said pigs are unclean. So, hey, Jesus, if you're going to send us away, just send us someplace where you really don't care. Just send us into the pigs. That'll be fine. We'll be okay with that. And Jesus says, fine, I'll send you into the pigs. And he does. See, the Jews standing there are like, no big deal. Pigs are already unclean. The demons can enter them. That's no problem for us. But what's interesting is in verse 33, what do the pigs do when they're possessed? They run into the sea, the very abyss that they asked Jesus not to cast them into. What are they doing? What are they doing? I kept asking myself that over and over in my mind as I'm preparing. Well, if the sea is the abyss, why did they even run into it in the first place? I think they're just trying to rub salt in the wound here. Because number one, we see as soon as Jesus goes to a place where no one has heard of him, he's got opposition. He's got these hundreds of demons stopping him. The enemy's saying, I don't want you to go here. I don't want you to go into this city. So I'm going to stop you by any means necessary. You'll look like you're doing a great thing. Your disciples will praise you and say, wow, look at what he's done. But I am going to stop you. He says, send us into the pigs, and the pigs kill themselves. And this is where the big problem happens, because there's witnesses. There's witnesses to this. The people who are taking care of the pigs see everything happen. They see the stranger get off a boat in the morning who has crossed it overnight. You don't cross the lake at nighttime. He's fine. He's unscathed. There's no problems with him. They're like, oh, watch this. Here comes Crazy Carl. Here comes the demon-possessed guy. Let's see what happens. He says, no, go. And all of a sudden, these pigs, who are fine, normal pigs doing what pigs do, go crazy and run off a cliff. These people are frightened. They probably think Jesus has some kind of partnership with these demons. How else could he have crossed the sea at night, unscathed, with no problems? And then he comes and says to this demon-possessed man, be gone. They go into the pigs, and the pigs go crazy into the sea. No, they're afraid. So they run back to their boss, and they tell their boss tells blah, blah, blah. It just spreads. It spreads so far, so quickly, that a crowd comes back to see what actually happened. They see what happened. They show up. See, they have no clue how to react. They've heard one story from a couple of witnesses who we don't know if they actually heard what Jesus said, but they just saw what happened. So they've got their own story. These people come, they don't know what to expect, and they see the man who is demon-possessed, who they could not help, sitting, clothed in his right mind at the feet of Jesus. And these people are afraid. Wow. Okay, no, all right, number one, we know you show up on our shores overnight. That's not normal. Number two, you've caused our pigs, for whatever reason, our livelihood, someone's economy, someone's farm, someone's living to completely go belly up over into the cliff, so they can't get that money back. And this guy is sitting here, normal. They become afraid. See, this story seems so good to be true, too good to be true, that the witnesses need confirmation. They need to know what happened. So they tell the story again and say, this man has been healed. And again, the fear wins out. These people, it's the unknown. They don't know what to do. They don't know God. They don't know the prophets. They don't know the law. And there's a stranger sitting here who's helped someone they may or may not have known before his possession. They definitely knew who he was while he was possessed, because you steer clear from people like that. And he's just sitting there. They're afraid, and the demons get their way. They say, you need to leave. You need to leave. You need to go. We can't have you here. We don't know what else you're going to do. Are you going to come into our city and take away, destroy our temple? Are you going to come into our city and destroy our marketplace? Are you going to come into our city and unleash your power upon us? They don't know. They're afraid. They have no clue, so they say go. And the demons get their way. They're like, yeah, finally, we stopped them. But what they didn't count on is the possessed man who is now free, being changed. He's sitting there. We don't know how long he had been sitting at Jesus' feet. The story doesn't tell us. But it had to be some amount of time, probably no longer than a day. Otherwise, Jesus would have started making his way into the city. So he's had a few hours, let's say, to sit at the feet of Jesus, to listen to what he has to say, and he's mesmerized. He says, maybe it's been years, who knows how long, but he's been sitting there naked, being thrown upon the ground, driven out into the wilderness and back. Jesus has compassion on him, has him clothed. He's sitting there, and he says, I want to follow you. I will follow you. I need to be near you. See, maybe he felt that he needed to be close to the person who delivered him from bondage so it wouldn't happen again. Maybe he was afraid that the demons would return. Maybe he wanted to see what else Jesus could do. He knew he had power. Or perhaps he just wanted to serve his Savior. We don't know. All we know is that he wanted to follow him. See, and Jesus replies in a way that it seems countercultural to the way we think about ministry. He says, you would expect that Jesus says, yeah, come on, let's go. Let's go. Come with me. He says, nope, stay. You need to go back home. In our modern westernized mind, we don't get it. We don't see what Jesus is doing here. Well, again, we got to think a little bit back to the cultural soup that Jesus is in here. He's crossed the sea. He's in a place where there are no Jews, and this Gentile man wants to come and do ministry with Jesus. And he's going back. He's going back to Israel. He knows he's going back. And if he brings a Gentile with him, what's going to happen? How are the people in Jerusalem going to hear his message? Are they going to be standoffish? Are they going to say, well, who are you to bring this Gentile here to Jerusalem? Is he circumcised? Are the Jews going to be so caught up in their religious 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that this man is going to be a greater hindrance to Jesus in his ministry in Jerusalem? Or should he just stay where he is? Should he go back home where Jesus commands him to go? We don't know. I can only infer. But the man here doesn't keep trying to convince Jesus he's wrong. He doesn't say, no, don't send me home. I need to be with you. He just simply says, okay, and heads back. But he doesn't do exactly what Jesus commands him to do, which is interesting. Because Jesus sends him back and says, tell everyone what God has done for you. What God has done for you. And he replies, and he goes back and he tells everyone what Jesus has done for him. Because again, this Gentile man doesn't have any formal Jewish training. Who does he know? He knows Jesus. That's it. That's who he knows. He knows that he was delivered. He knows that he was changed because of one man. So that's what he does. He goes and tells his story. And here is where the demons are thwarted. The one man that they oppressed and held back and held down is the one man Jesus uses to spread his message to that city. Jesus couldn't go in there. He said, all right, I can't go, so I'm going to send someone who can. You think you got me, Legion? No. I'll show you how it's done. See, number one, this man did two things after he was freed by Jesus. One, he desperately wanted to be with him. And two, he obeyed without putting up any resistance or any second thoughts. He said, sure, I will go home. See, I would argue that many of us are like this demon-possessed man. We have met Jesus. We may not be demon-possessed. I doubt any of us in this room are. But we have met Jesus, and he has set us free. What are we doing with it? Do we react the same way this man did? Do we spend every waking moment we can with our Savior? I don't, but I'm beginning to get there. The more time I spend with Jesus, the more time I want to spend with him. this weird thing where I think I've outstepped him. Say, yeah, now I'm getting where I want to be. And Jesus says, no, here's more. Oh, well, okay, I'll come. I'll see that challenge, and I'll step forward even more. And Jesus says, nope, keep coming. So before we know it, we've taken 1 step, 2 steps. We're at a dozen steps. And we're following all out of this desire to love him, this desire to grow closer to him. See, the disciples didn't get it. The quote-unquote seminary trained aren't following him the same way this man who only knows Jesus is. See, sometimes I think when we have walked with our Savior for an extended amount of time, we start to think we've got it all pegged, like, oh, God will only do this or God will only do that. And yes, when we start to think rightly about God, this is called doctrine. And it's very, very important. We need doctrine. We need it so that we can have these boundaries, so that we don't go off into heresy and blasphemy and all these big, old Latin terms that we really don't use anymore. But doctrine is very important. But doctrine is a tool. We have to remember that. It's a tool. Please, please do not replace the tool with the person who gave us the tool. It's so much easier to have something in your hand and say this step 1, step 2, subparagraph B and A is how we are supposed to act, and this is how we're supposed to go. And yes, to a certain extent, that is true. But are we really, really, truly following Jesus? Are we in love with him? Not romantic, kind of squishy Hollywood. I just watched The Vow with my wife this weekend. Yeah, it was squishy and good, and it was a okay love story. I'm a guy. I don't get into love stories the same way women do. But that's not the kind of love I'm talking about. I'm talking about this all-consuming passion and desire to be with somebody, to be with them at all costs. See, do we want to sit at the feet of Jesus the way this possessed man did? Do we want to? For a long part of my Christian walk, I really didn't. I was okay with doctrine because that's easier. It's explainable. It's logical. And God is logical and God is explainable, yes. But there's a certain mystery to God and to Jesus that I think we need to embrace that we've lost. I think it's okay to not know every answer for everything. And here's the main point, really. See, I believe that Jesus is telling us, much like he told this freed man, to go to the people we know, to go to the people from our hometown who know us the best, who used to know what we were like before we met this Jesus, before we met and fell in love with this Jesus, and go tell them how he's changed our life. So often, I think, when it comes to this big E word, evangelism, we think we have to go to these strangers and hand out tracts and say, do you know you're a sinner? Do you know how much God has done for you? You've never met this person before in your life. And yes, okay, we do need to reach out to all the world and all of God's children. Yes, that is important. Paul even commands us to. He says, for if we do not go and teach, then how will they hear it? We need to do that. But there's also, I'd say, a maybe less threatening or less invasive way to do evangelism. Let's walk with the people we already know. They're in our life for a reason. The person you work next to in your cubicle, or the person you get your groceries from, or the person who lives across your fence, they see you every day. They see you interact. They see you make these choices. Why not just simply strike up a conversation with them? It doesn't have to be about Jesus, but eventually it should be. Because if we're falling more and more in love with Christ, then that should spice our discussions. It should be like a fragrant aroma to this person. Because we know who Jesus is. We know how he's changed our life. And trust me, I'm saying this for myself just as much as anybody else, because I sit right across from a guy who wants nothing to do with God or the church every day. So how am I spicing my conversations with him so that he becomes attracted to the same Jesus that I'm so attracted to, so passionately involved with? Like I've already said this morning, God is far bigger and deeper than anything we could ever dream up. Are we sharing that? Are we sharing this wonderful mystery that we've discovered? Or are we keeping it to ourselves? Are we being more like the disciples who just want to be physically close to Jesus? Or are we like this delivered man who is able to see the power of Jesus and experience the power of Jesus firsthand and then go share it? And if you're like me, you're thinking, well, I've never really been delivered from a demon. I don't have anything super miraculous about my life. But you do have a story, right? You do have a life. And it could speak to somebody. It'll speak louder than the judging, condemnational words that we sometimes associate with evangelism. Turn or burn, right? We've all heard it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. How about, come with me? I want you to see who this Jesus is. Throw all your preconceived notions and ideas of who he is by the wayside. Just come and meet him. Come and meet him with me. Because I'm still discovering. I don't have it pegged. I don't think we're ever meant to. Even on the other side of eternity, we'll still be discovering great and wonderful things about our God and our big brother who's already up there. So are we willing? Are we willing to just open up dialogue? That's it. I like to think of evangelism as an open dialogue between two friends, someone who doesn't know who Jesus is and someone who does, trying to guide them in the path and say, come along, join this family, be a part of what God is doing. Please pray with me. Father, we thank you for the example that you have given us in this demon-possessed man. Father, a Gentile who knew nothing about you personally or about your son, yet because he encountered him, was changed. Father, again and again, every time I read about Jesus, I am surprised and amazed at how nothing, not even the demons, could stop his ministry, could stop his purpose. They thought they had him. And if we keep reading the account here in Luke, we'll see another time where they think they had him. And he set everyone free. He set everyone who was willing to believe in the work he did on the cross free. Thank you. Thank you for the freedom that you have given us through your Son, Jesus. Through his obedience, through his sacrifice. We are able to be grafted back into your family. We give you praise, we give you glory, and we give you honor. And may we spice our conversations with the love of your Son, Jesus, and how he has changed me, and how he has changed us. Because people need to hear it. They're lost, they're hurting. They can't put their finger on it. Maybe we can help them see what they're missing. A God who loves them far deeper than any kind of love that we could ever imagine. A God who accepts them far beyond any kind of acceptance. A God who wants to forgive them. You are a great God.